Alright class, let's get going. Our topic is the Great War, World War I. Our essential question, how did World War I change Europe and the world forever? Now the Schlieffen Plan was a German plan, and it was initially going to be a plan to knock France out of the war and then turn and attack Russia. Schlieffen was a general in the German army. Remember, the German army was very, very militaristic. It came from the Prussian army. Germany at this time was the largest economic force in Europe, so they had a lot of wherewithal to be able to put this in motion. German planned to attack and invade France through Belgium and conquer France and then turn to invade Russia. So it initially was a good plan, but there's always kinks in plans. The Battle of the Marne happened September 1914. German forces came within sight of Paris before being stopped. So the Schlieffen Plan, initially in 1914, go through Belgium, attack into Paris. Once they took Paris, then they'd be able to knock France out of the war. The Battle of the Marne was a turning point because the French were actually able to, they had soldiers that were in Paris coming to help. They couldn't get them to the battle, so they put them in taxi cabs and they drove them up there, and the taxi cab drivers kept going around and around and picking up soldiers until they got enough soldiers up there to stop the Germans from invading and taking over all of Paris. The Western Front was stalled out in France, so at this point then there was a front that was in France, and it did not move very much at all during the war, and that would have been trench warfare. Some of the reasons why the Schlieffen Plan failed: Belgium had more resistance than what was expected. Germans did not draw the French out. The Germans wanted to have the French move, especially into Alsace-Lorraine, to try to do some of the fighting there where they could take command of the situation, but they didn't. Russia mobilized way too quickly, and so then Germany was fighting on two fronts, the Eastern and Western Front. So they had to take a lot of troops and send them towards Russia. Now, trench warfare. This is the first time that trench warfare took place throughout almost the entire length of the war, especially in France, not so much in Russia. Resulted from a stalemate that lasted 4 years. The trenches stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border, so they were hundreds of miles long. The Battle of Verdun was one of these trench warfare battles that took place. It lasted eight months. 1916 started in February and went all the way up into October, November. German Battle of Attrition. The Germans felt that if they continued to send people and fighting at the Battle of Verdun, sooner or later the French would just give up. And this led to huge numbers of casualties. The French lost 540,000 troops. Germans lost 430,000. The French General Pétain became a national hero after this because he continued to fight and hold his ground. Verdun was the gateway to Paris. Another battle similar to losses, the Battle of the Somme. It was particularly a British battle. The British soldiers and the British commanders led this battle. There were some French, but it was primarily an offensive into the German territory, whereas the Battle of Verdun was a German offensive. This was a British and French offensive. It was the bloodiest battle of the war. Britain, and once again this lasted over a period of months. Britain lost 420,000 soldiers, France 200,000, Germans 650,000 soldiers. That's more than 1 million soldiers. Now, All Quiet on the Western Front is a famous novel, and it depicted the fighting that took place during World War I. Now, technological advances during this time. Of course, the Industrial Revolution played huge into these staggering numbers of people that were killed due to the fact that they could now make many, many guns. They could make many, many machine guns, tanks, airplanes, and so when they're able to mass produce weapons that could kill multiple people with single shots, then you're going to have a lot of casualties. The machine gun. One machine gun equaled 40 men with rifles. And literally, they could just mow people down. They'd just line up their machine guns, and people would just continue to run, 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 run. They were using these new technological advances against old school ways, where they would line people up like they used to do in the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and march forward, and then they would attack. It didn't work, and the machine guns just mowed people down. Tanks were new. They were slow but mobile, and they had artillery, so they could, of course, shoot. The airplane was the first planes. Used grenades. They'd be flying in their airplanes and they'd just throw grenades out the window and try to blow people up. Sometimes it'd fall into their cockpit and blow themselves up, but it was used primarily to spot the enemy, but then they started throwing grenades out the window. The Germans were the first to use synchronized guns with propellers. They would try to mount the propellers near the cockpit so they could just pull the trigger and shoot, but then they'd shoot their propeller off and then they'd crash and die. So the Germans knew that they needed some synchronization there, and they were the first to do it. Poison gas. They used mustard gas. It would blind or kill people, but once they got a lot of people, then would just don the gas mask and they'd be good to go. U-boats, or German subs, sank quite a few of the ships of the navies of the Allies, especially the British. And they wouldn't just sink ships that were in the Navy, they would also sink other ships. Now, other major theaters of the war: the Germans defeat poorly prepared Russians at Tannenberg. They take thousands of the prisoners. So the Russians tried to attack into Germany. They were not prepared whatsoever. The Germans actually encircled them, took thousands and thousands of prisoners, essentially knocking Russia out of the war. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk happened in December of 1917. At this time, Lenin had held a revolution in Russia, which we'll cover next. And they took Russia out of the war. They said that they did not want to fight anymore, that the fighting wasn't worth it. In doing so, Russia had to give and gives Germany 1/4 of Russian territory. So the whole area, Poland and Estonia, Latvia, countries that now border Russia and Poland, they had to give up all that land. Now, the Gallipoli campaign, I think this is our last word, was a campaign with the Anzacs, which stands for Australian New Zealand Army Corps. The Anzacs were fighting against the Ottoman Empire, the Turks. The Anzacs fight the Turks in hopes of knocking out the Ottoman Empire. Brits and Anzacs were gunned down. This was a very poorly planned attack. They were trying to attack Gallipoli is a peninsula in Turkey. They were trying to attack this peninsula and then go on and take Constantinople and knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. Did not happen. And the Anzacs and the British were gunned down, and thousands were killed. Now, British naval blockade. The British used the Navy to strangle the Central Powers. Germany could not get much needed resources. And the Lusitania was sunk, killing 1,200 people, 128 of them Americans. So the British Navy, they were very successful in blockading and not allowing ships and resources to Germany, but at the same time, these U-boats, or German submarines, they were very effective, and they just started unrestricted submarine warfare. If there was a ship coming into bay or in the dock trying to get to London or France, these U-boats would just missile them and torpedo them, and take them down. The Lusitania was one of those. And a lot of people have seen the movie Titanic, and the Titanic sinks in a couple hours. Lusitania gets hit, and they go down in 18 minutes, and thousands died, including 120 Americans, which is one of the big reasons why the United States got into the war.